I'm going to be reading from Tangerine, Saturday, September 23rd, on page 126. Today was the first day of football season for the Lake Windsor High Seagulls. They played a home game against the Cypress Bay High Cardinals. Dad was pretty hyper, like this was the most important day of his life or something. We got there at 1 o'clock for a 2 o'clock game, but I was glad we did. We barely managed to crowd into the home side bleachers. We sat with the other Lake Windsor fans and with a few Cypress Bay fans who remembered that half our bleachers had been condemned. I hadn't seen the bleachers since the day of the sinkhole. There they sat, a big gray erector set now looped with yellow police ribbons that said "Do not cross," like a big VIP section reserved for people who were never going to show up. By 1:30, the rest of the Cypress Bay fans had gotten the message. There was nowhere for them to sit. They were milling around both end zones trying to find open places to stand and watch the game. Mom kept saying, "This isn't right. Didn't anybody plan for this?" Finally, a group of teenagers wearing red and white Cardinal shirts decided to do something about it. They walked around to the visitors' side, ducked under the yellow ribbon, and sat down in the front row. Then they gestured back to the other Cypress Bay fans, like they were pantomiming. "See, we made it. It didn't collapse." Other fans started heading over there. Then suddenly we saw this fat guy in a gray suit go running across the field. Mom called out, "Look, that's Mr. Bridges." Sure enough, Mr. Bridges was yelling and waving at Cypress Bay fans to go back, to get out of there, but they weren't listening. In fact, more and more red and white shirts seemed to be willing to take a chance on the condemned bleachers. A photographer in a Tangerine Times cap started bobbing in front of Mr. Bridges, taking pictures of him trying to turn the mob back. He finally gave up, yelling, and came stomping back across the field, red-faced, like he was about to have a heart attack. It was past the time to start the game, but nothing was happening on the field. Mom spotted Eric in his uniform, light blue helmet, white pants, and light blue jersey with Seagulls written on the front. He had a white number 1 on his back. Arthur Bauer was standing next to him, of course. He was wearing number 4. We continued to sit baking in the sun for nearly 30 minutes while nothing happened. Finally, a squadron of police cruisers appeared on Seagull Way. They had their sirens sounding and their lights flashing. Right behind them came a square white truck with a big satellite dish on the top and Channel 2 News on the side. They all pulled in behind the home bleachers. While the other cops spread out, 2 big sheriff's deputies marched across the field and confronted the Cypress Bay fans. It was all over in a minute. The fans weren't there to fight. They surrendered immediately, ducking back under the ribbons and finding places to stand along the far sideline. At last, the referees and players took the field to start the game. It turned out to be a pretty sloppy game, considering that the Tangerine Times had picked both the Lake Windsor Seagulls and the Cypress Bay Cardinals as teams to watch in its preseason poll. Eric kicked off for our side, driving the ball deep in the Cypress Bay end zone, but then he stood on the sideline for the rest of the half. Neither offense could get anything going. Each side would run 3 plays and then punt the ball away. Eric was the place kicker, but Anton Thomas, in addition to everything else, did the punting. By the end of the first half, Anton had run for about 50 yards, but nearly all of his passes had been dropped. The Seagulls had never gotten the ball close enough for Eric to try a field goal. The Cypress Bay offense was no better. They had a big fullback who could pick up 3 yards to the middle, but that was about it. It was 0-0 at the half. Tina Page and the rest of the Lake Windsor cheerleaders, the Sea Girls, took to the field for a halftime dance routine. The third quarter was as dull as the first 2, but Cypress Bay's offense suddenly got it together in the final period. They drove 85 yards for a touchdown, most of these yards coming from that big fullback. The kick for the extra point was good, and Cypress Bay led 7-0. Antoine responded with 2 short runs and then a beautiful 40-yard pass to Terry Donnelly, who was wide open down the left sideline. I could have caught that pass. My grandmother could have caught it. And for that matter, but Terry Donnelly dropped it. Anton had to punt again. That's when I noticed the black clouds rolling in. The whole mess with the visitors' bleacher and Mr. Bridges and the cops had pushed the game past the 4 o'clock barrier. In a matter of minutes, we went from sunny skies to kaboom. And then it came down, a hard, cold rain. Most of the fans climbed down from the bleachers and ran for their cars. Mom yelled, "Come on, you two," but Dad said, "No, you go ahead, I'm staying." So I said, "I'm staying too." Mom was already on the ground. She yelled back, "Fine, stay. I hope neither of you gets killed." She ran back to the Volvo, leaving us to get soaked. Or worse. The rain turned out to be a blessing for Lake Windsor. The offensive line started pushing Cypress Bay back, letting Anton move the ball steadily down the field. 5 yards, 6 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards. With 2 minutes to play, the Seagulls were all the way down to the Cypress Bay 5-yard line. Antoine faked a run to the right and lofted a pass into the left corner of the end zone that some mud-covered Seagull receiver caught for the touchdown. A soggy cheer went up from the few fans left in the bleachers. The score was 7-6, and Eric's big moment had arrived. He came running onto the field in his perfectly clean, mud-free uniform to kick the extra point that would tie the game. Eric had never missed an extra point. Never. I was expecting to see Arthur Bauer trotting out with him, but number 4 was still standing there on the sideline with the other clean uniforms. The two muddy teams lined up. Eric got into his kicking stance, and Anton Thomas crouched down in front of him to hold the ball. I said, "Check it out, Dad. Anton's the holder." "I see," he said grimly. "Eric told me that Arthur would be his holder. I don't think it's such a good idea to throw a surprise like this at your kicker." Dad and Eric and I and everybody else figured Arthur had taken over Mike Costello's job. But no, there was Anton in the crouch, getting ready to spin the laces and set the ball down for Eric. The referee blew his whistle, the clock started to tick, and Lake Windsor's big center snapped the ball. Eric, his head down, in total concentration, took 2 steps forward like he rehearsed 1,000,000 times. His foot started toward the ball in a powerful arc, and then, the most incredible thing, Anton whipped the ball away at the last second, like Lucy does, with Charlie Brown. He took off running right around the right side, and crossed the line goal untouched for a 2-point conversion. Seagulls led 8-7. At the same moment, Eric, who clearly did not expect Anton to pull the ball away, kicked at nothing but the air. His left foot went flying in one direction, his right foot in another. For a split second, he was a parallel line 3 foot above the ground. Then he made a perfect banana peel backflop, landing in the mud. The people around us started laughing, hooting and cheering, all at the same time. Anton spiked the ball in the end zone, and all the Lake Windsor players, except Eric, ran over and jumped on him. All the Lake Windsor players on the sideline, except Arthur, started jumping up and down too. Eric finally got up and walked to the sideline to get his kicking tee. His front was still clean and white, but his back was now filthy. He kicked the ball back to the Cardinals, but they fumbled it away, and that's how it ended. Lake Windsor 8, Cypress Bay 7. When we got back to the car, Mom just said, "From here, it sounded like we won." I wanted to tell her all about Eric's banana peel backflop special, but Dad cut in right away. "Yes, we won on a fake kick. They sent Eric out to fake the kick for the extra point. That drew the offense to him, and it cleared the way for Anton to run it for 2 points." Mom thought for a minute. "So Eric did something that helped to win the game?" "Most definitely," Dad said. "It's not something that shows up in the stats in the newspaper. It's not something people will remember, but it helped win the game." I thought to myself, "Not remember? You gotta be kidding. Eric's flying banana peel backflop in the mud is the one thing about this game that everybody is going to remember." Dad continued talking in this manner throughout dinner, pounding home his theme to Eric, that Eric had contributed big time to the victory, that Eric had actually made victory possible by being the decoy. I don't think Eric was even listening. He was just sitting there, looking down, twisting his varsity ring around and around on his finger. After dinner, Dad flipped on the TV so we could all watch the local news. The lead story on Channel 2 was the revolt of the Cypress Bay fans and their brief takeover of the condemned visitors' bleachers. About 2/3 of the way through the broadcast came the Sunday Sports Roundup. The sports anchorman went through the professional baseball and football stuff, then the college football scores, then the high school scores. Lake Windsor 8, Cypress Bay 7. The broadcast ended with a feature called The Week in Sports. Week is spelled W-E-A-K, which is not the same as week, like a week of school. What does it mean? It was a collection of sports bloopers, and guess who they saved for last? The anchorman said something like, "Finally, a play that looks like it was drawn up by the Three Stooges. Watch closely," and there it was, a ground-level view of the ball being snapped to Anton, of Eric striding forward confidently, and whoop, up in the air he flew. It was even more comical than I had remembered. Eric went splashing down into the mud, but he didn't stay there. They rewound the tape so that he popped back up, flopped again, popped back up, flopped again. Finally, the camera turned toward the end zone to catch Antoine spiking the ball. It zoomed in on his face. Antoine was laughing and pointing his finger at that big center, who was pointing back at him. When the anchorman came back on, he was cracking up. So were all the other news people. The credits started rolling. They started saying stuff like, "Does that school have a diving team? And I hear those mud baths are good for wrinkles." Dad got up, snapped off the TV. The four of us sat there in a stony silence. I was thinking that if I were at somebody else's house, we'd be rolling on the floor and laughing at this. I was thinking that kids all over Florida were rolling on the floor and laughing at this. At Eric Fisher, the flying place kicker. But this isn't somebody else's home. This is the house built on the Eric Fisher football dream. Finally, Dad said to Eric, "Hey, all you can do is laugh it off." Mom agreed. "That's right. You just have to leave it behind you. That's all you can do. You leave it behind you, and it's over with." The four of us got up and went our separate ways. Me up to my room. I stared at my window, at the back wall. Forget it, Dad. Forget it, Mom. Eric can't laugh this off. Eric can't leave this humiliation behind him. Someone has to pay for this. I'm not sure why. I'm sure, but I am. Someone has to pay for this.